folks, Ariel over here at Nyth, where today I want to talk a little bit about food storage in a tiny house. This was prompted partially by getting about a few million questions. That's a slight exaggeration, but lots and lots of questions after the several canning videos I've posted recently about where in the world do you put all that food when you live in a tiny house. I don't think I've done a kitchen tour, but it was quite a while ago. Maybe I should do an updated one on that. But this video is specifically about where I store food. So if you're new here, welcome. I live off-grid on in the mountains of northern Wyoming in a tiny house on wheels. And the dimensions here are, I've got a whole video specifically on the dimensions actually in here, but the main floor here is about 160 square feet. It's actually 157, I think. And if you count the loft space, then it would take it a little over 200. If you guys hear any crackling and such in the foreground, that is the wood stove crackling away down there. We're getting some flurries today, and it was in the teens again overnight. Anyway, so where do I put food in here? That's go measure out a space on your floor if you want to see what that actually looks like. I can almost touch, here I can definitely touch both walls. If I come out here, I can almost touch both walls. So that's, it's a little over 6 feet by 24 feet. So take some masking tape or whatever, mark out a square that big. That's what I'm working with here. And I do store food. Now, first I want to address, why would you do that? For one, I think anybody should have some amount of food around, just because if you're a human being, all humans need to eat. That's a pretty basic need. Most of us do it multiple times a day, every day, for our whole lives. And you can certainly fast. That isn't going to kill you. I've done it multiple times and so on. But having food around is a somewhat important thing. And if you don't grow any of your own food, don't produce anything yourself, none of that, you still probably want to have some around because, guys, stuff goes wrong. Our current setup in like the grocery store system is every grocery store pretty much has what they'll sell within 24 hours. There's trucks coming in pretty much every single day. This is true across most of the country. And so whatever amount they would normally sell in a day is going to be gone the next day. If something keeps the next day's trucks from getting there, there's not going to be anything to go buy. That happens in my area occasionally because we're tucked into the mountains here, and sometimes every route in will be closed due to snow or avalanches or mudslides or things like that, especially in the winter. And so that's a real possibility. You may live where there's no snow, but there's still there. You probably live where there is either earthquakes or tornadoes or hurricanes or snowstorms or ice storms, which are usually an even bigger mess, or whatever. Things can go wrong. It just happens in life. In my experience in life, eventually things go wrong. That's, Murphy's Law or whatever you want to call it. Things don't always go exactly as planned. So just for that reason, having enough food around to eat, where I think it's hilarious when people are like, oh, snow's coming, so I'll run to the grocery store and get bread and milk. Well, I make my own bread here and I don't drink milk anyway, but I don't ever do that. I don't ever look at the weather and think, oh, this thing is coming, I must go get food, because I always have food here. It's also a great backup to have just as a little bit of a buffer. Like it's recommended you have a little bit of savings in case of emergencies. It's generally recommended you don't drive your car around on empty all the time and then just put one cup in when it actually quits on you and drive till it quits again. I mean, most people would probably acknowledge that's not a very intelligent way to travel around. What if something goes wrong? What if you lose your job? Even not a hurricane hit the whole East Coast, but just you personally lost your job. That happens to lots and lots of people. Wouldn't you be less stressed out about that if you not only had a little savings of cash or whatever way you like to store your money, but have some food? I don't have to go to the grocery store. I can just, exercise some self-control and not go out to eat for a little while. But I can eat the food that I have in my house, myself, my family, my children, whatever, and I know I'll be okay. I don't have to worry about grocery bills in the immediate future. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect, the main thing for me, because I kind of just consider that like the kind of thing that any responsible adult would do, just like not driving around on empty all the time. So have I would say like 3 days is a minimum, probably 3 months is better. But if you're going to grow your own food, that's the other side of this. If I'm going to try to produce a lot of the food that I eat here, whether it's something like tomatoes, which I can't actually grow here, that's why I drove to the neighboring state and bought them to be able to can them when they were growing there in the closest place to me where they do grow. Or even the things that I do grow, my potatoes, etc. Those potatoes are ready once in a year, and there's a few week span there. I can dig some when they're a little smaller and eat a few meals, and then eventually the plant dies and you kind of have to get the rest out of the ground. So, you know, maybe there's a month where I can have fresh potatoes out of the garden. But if I want to eat potatoes for the next 11 months till that happens again in my place, I'm going to have to store them in some way. Same thing with tomatoes. You can eat fresh tomatoes for, if you live in a really warm place, maybe even longer. But in most places, most things, even if you're in a really hot place, I think some of those things are only, you know, ripe and ready and available in the winter because it's too hot in the summer. But most things have a cycle, and most of those things come around once per year. So if you want to be able to produce your own stuff and eat that, and not just eat whatever you can have in that month, but have some options throughout the year, you're going to need to store a year's worth, or at least 11 months pretty much, of any one thing. Like my garlic. I just harvested garlic. I'm hoping that I have enough to last me a whole year until I have garlic growing or ready to harvest in the garden next fall, or late summer here. Late summer for most of you, fall here. So if you're going to do that kind of rotation, you pretty much are always storing a year's worth of food. I think that is most ideal because, of course, I think as many of us as can grow as much of our own food or source it as locally as possible, it's better for our health, the plant's health, the soil health, and everything else. I think these days the average ingredient in a meal travels 1,500 miles to get to your plate for you to eat it. So even my 90-mile each way trip to get tomatoes is far more local than most people are eating their food these days. So it improves the health, the quality, the flavor, the nutrition, all kinds of things if you can keep it more local. So that would be a reason to store a full year's worth of food. I do not have room in my 157 square feet here to quite store a full year's worth. That is true. I do, however, I would say I have at least 6 months worth of food in here at all times. And because of my somewhat limited space and my somewhat limited climate, I'm just not able to quite produce everything I want to eat in a year and store it here. My long-term goal on my own place, etc., would be to be able to produce about 95% of everything I use. There's some things I'm never going to live anywhere warm enough, I hope, to grow coconuts, and I really like that. There's easier ways to get salt than trying to produce it from anything I can source locally in a mountainous area. So there's going to always be some things I'm going to want to buy from somewhere else. But I would like to produce most of my own stuff. I'm not quite there yet. I produce, between veggies and the hunting I do with a neighbor, probably 60% of the food that I eat in a year right now. Somewhere around there, 50 to 60, and I would like to take that higher. But I do always have about 6 months of food in here. So where do I put it? Again, you know, this is how big my house is. And I find that I have plenty of room to store at least 6 months of food here. So I don't think that for anyone else living in America, there's hardly anyone in America, and you may be the exception. If so, I'm not talking to you, but hardly anyone else living in America these days. And maybe even in other parts of the developed world, but certainly in the States, who is living in a smaller space than I am. So if I can store 6 months of food here, I'm pretty sure you can too. So where is it? Well, this is my main pantry. In a lot of tiny houses with a similar layout, this is often the closet area, like a clothing closet where you can hang dresses, pants, whatever. That was less important to me than food. So this is a somewhat deep, you can see, you know, I can reach the back, but I'm the whole way in there. This is deep enough that I can have 6 quart jars from the back to the front in each row, and I can get, 6 across on each shelf, and there's 5 shelves here. Not everything is in quart jars, obviously, but that's an easy way to measure. So 6 times 6 is 36, times 5 shelves, 5 times 36 is 180. So in this pantry alone, I could put 180 quarts of food. Now, obviously, I have some things in gallon jars, like some of my lentils and split peas and wheat that I grind to make my own bread. I have some store-bought things on the very bottom shelf that I can't easily access here. A few of it's some food that Burley eats, and then things like baking soda and salt and so on. Popcorn I can't grow here, and so on, that I do have to buy. Most of the top 4 shelves is things that I have produced. This is herbs and spices, some of which are also here. This tends to be more the stuff I grow because that's more in bulk. Some of these are ones that I buy because they do not grow in my area or climate. So that is my main food storage, and that is a pretty big pantry, and I can keep a lot of stuff in there. Next, I have above here. This area is kind of my, I don't know what you would call it. It's my oils, vinegars, salts, honeys, all that kind of stuff. So there's coconut oil, olive oil, 3 different kinds of salt, several different kinds of vinegar, maple syrup, a couple kinds of honey, and so on. That's kind of my storage for all that stuff up there. I do really like, if you weren't here before, I had the doors up here. I really do like that. It lets me keep just everything so much tidier and cleaner looking. I really love having the cabinet doors in my kitchen. Down here I have several big drawers. These I tend to use to store things like nuts and dried fruits, on which I dry myself. Some things I can't produce here. Pecans do not grow anywhere close to this area, but that's things I still like to buy. So I have various bags of things like that in both of these large drawers. Coconut and dried tomatoes that my mother sent me from their lovely tomato garden, since they had plenty. And so both of those drawers are food. This is all food. This is all food. As I come back here in the kitchen, some of these are partial things. The rest of these cabinets, in case you're wondering, they're just my storage of my pots and pans and hot pads and cooking utensils and all that. Under the sink here, you probably know if you watch the garlic video, I've got my big box of garlic. That lives under there as being the coolest dry place in my house. Up here, these doors open, and the bottom part is my plates and bowls and that kind of thing, and the top part is all, tends to be, because they fit really nicely, my purchase canned stuff. Coconut milk, sardines, mackerel, some beans, things like that I don't produce myself, and the store-bought cans fit nicely up there. Over on this end, I tend to keep a lot of, my KitchenAid mixer lives in there, but I also keep a lot of the herbs and tinctures and stuff I'm making. We're going to be making some salves in a little bit with some of those things that wild harvested and have been having soaking in oil or whatever they're doing up there. This, I don't know if you really call this food. I do have some, I don't drink very regularly, but do have some alcohol in there, and that is where I keep a lot of my canning supplies. And of course I have a little fridge and freezer. And then I can keep things, because I use the shower portion of my bathroom as storage, and I actually have my hanging clothes on the top in there. I can keep some things like some crates of potatoes down on the floor there. Then also, behind you, there is a loft above the couch, and that's kind of my little storage loft. It stores various things, but one of the things up there is a cabinet that I just found at a thrift store or garage sale or something for like $5, and it happened to fit right there, and so it's been really handy because it had nice little built-in shelves, and I can store other bulkier things around it. But I also put overflow of canned goods up there, and a lot of the herbs and roots and stuff that I like making teas out of. So you guys have seen that stuff in some videos. My mint or horsetail or dandelion roots or rose hips or all that kind of thing. Those kind of live up there, so I can grab whatever I want and make whatever flavor of tea I'm in the mood for having. So that is where I store food. And like I said, I'm in a pretty small place, and I have no problem at all having plenty of food here, so that I always know that I always have food. I don't have to do any emergency trips to the grocery store. I actually have a laminated grocery list of all the things that I would ever use. It's not even all groceries, but anything I would access at a grocery store. And so if I know I'm running low on something, I can just highlight it on my list. And when I do want to go to the store, I can say, oh, I'm down to my last can of that or my last bottle of this. Let's pick up that stuff. But I never have to go at any particular time. That's another interesting comment I've found over the years that I get. Well, but tiny houses are cool, but they're not practical because you'd have to go to the grocery store for every single meal. Well, guys, I don't do anything of the kind. I go to the grocery store when I have time to put it in my schedule and pick up the things I'm running low on. And if I'm out of some particular thing at the moment, through lack of planning and realizing I was getting low on it, I eat something different. It is not a problem. I can, again, I could probably, I mean, just between, even with the can, like things like canned sardines and chicken, and then all the fruits and veggies and pickles and herbs and spices and lentils and barley and peas and beans and wheat. I mean, I could eat soups and stir fries and fresh bread and, I mean, awesome food. If you locked me in the house or snowed me in the house, which has never happened or whatever, I would be fine here for a very long time. So, hopefully that answers the question about where do I store everything when I live in a tiny house. I don't have quite a full year's worth. Again, in the long-term plans, not here in this location where I'm not on my own ground, but long-term plans, a root cellar would definitely be very close to the top of my priority list. A place to make it easier to store bulk root veggies and a lot of other cooler things without any need for external electricity or anything to make that happen. But that's not going to happen here. Our frost line is at least 5 feet down, so to bury one into solid rock where every part of it needed to be at least 5 feet underground to take advantage of the Earth's more consistent internal temperatures, it's just not a practical venture here, though there's every single day I would love to have one. That is a future plan. But even just in this limited space, that is what I am able to do. Now, as far as I mentioned hunting, a neighbor and I do hunt together and usually process 2 elk for the year, which provides a whole lot. And they're set up, they've got a shop area to do all that. We do all the processing ourselves. I'd actually be curious, I know that really grosses some people out. Is any of this crowd interested in how you process an elk? I don't even know if I would have time to film it or not, but I don't know if people would be interested in that or not at all. Can let me know down below. But so we do that there, and I do have the ability to keep a second full-sized freezer in a neighbor's shop, and that is where some of the frozen meat stays. And then I can transfer smaller amounts to my little freezer. But even without that, I've got meat in there, I've got, some various canned meats, and while I think some meat is a part of an overall balanced and healthy diet, I certainly, my diet is more veggie heavy. People have asked, with putting up, various fruits and veggies, am I a vegetarian? I'm not, but I would say I have a heavily veggie-based diet. If you look at a plate, probably 2/3 or more of my plate when I eat something is going to be vegetables, and the rest is going to be whatever else it is that meal. So I'm not a vegetarian, but a very veggie-heavy diet, and I do try to produce as much of it as I can in my climate here and eat as much of it as I can fresh and preserve as much as possible. Oh yeah, and the preserving, we're probably going to have a video on this shortly. I, make my own fermented things as well, like sauerkraut. I've got a little crock down here by my feet that I use for that, and so on. So hopefully that answers the questions about where in the world do you put all your food when you live in a tiny house, and maybe inspires you if you're one of the people who lives in any size of house who does not have enough food to be okay if the grocery store should run out for whatever reason, or if there should be a weather event that causes a disruption in the supply chains, even if it's not in your area, if all the roads getting to you are shut down by a weather event in between you and where the food's coming from, to be able to store. And I know some people have their food storage. They have these things they eat, like their frozen pizzas and whatever, and then they've got this bunker of stored food in case of the zombie apocalypse. I'm not really into that kind of, everything I store here is the stuff I eat. I rotate through things all the time. Most years, everything has been gone through within the time span of a year. If I get new stuff, I put, the new can or jar or box or whatever it is in the back, keep using the oldest stuff first. Everything I store here is not stored just for the sake of storing food. It's here because it's the things I eat and I rotate through, and it gives me a buffer. I never have emergencies where I need to run to the store instantly. If I lost all of my income or something happened, or I got, like I said, completely snowed in, which has never happened, I would be fine just being here. That's why I do that, in addition to that I'm trying to store as much of what I can produce in a year as I can to eat as much of my home-produced food as possible through the next year. So hopefully that answers all the questions. Hi folks, Ariel over here. Thanks for spending some of your valuable time watching these videos. Hopefully you found something beautiful, educational, interesting, peaceful, relaxing, or useful while you were here. If so, find more videos here, subscribe so you don't miss any updates, and if you like what you found here, feel free to like and share away so that others can benefit as well. You all have a wonderful day.